Behind a veil of mist lies a hidden world, concealed amongst the mountain ranges of Mysteria. Vibrant trees rise from the steep cliffs, birds soaring through the canyons, silverfish weaving through the rivers far below. The sun streams through the clouds, illuminating the rooftops of buildings shrouded by mist. Carved into the rock and hanging from thick vines, the villages of Mysteria are home to a people as steadfast and mysterious as the mountain ranges they call home. From birth, they learn to traverse the steep landscape, relying on their own strength and agility to travel from one building to another. Hanging gardens are suspended between the cliffs, a burst of green against the backdrop of stone and rock. Even the largest villages are home to close-knit communities founded long ago by the great houses of Mysteria. Yet the veil of mist hides a wealth of secrets far beyond those of the villages tucked into the mountainside. Grandmasters roam the land, equal parts mystery and legend, gifting their time and wisdom to those determined enough to seek them out. Secret organizations work behind the scenes, ensuring the safety of their people, while long-forgotten clans hide from those that would see them extinguished. The world beyond the mountains holds little interest to the people of Mysteria, who prefer to lead simple lives in the company of their fellow villagers. Removed from the struggles and petty conflicts of the outside world, they find satisfaction in introspection and self-discipline, training rigorously to strengthen their bodies and sharpen their minds. Despite the difficulties of living in such a place, Mysterians would argue that the beauty and tranquility of their home more than makes up for any inconvenience. Their hard work and dedication are rewarded with the experience of living in one of the most beautiful environments in all of Wraith, as the light of dawn breaks through the mist and illuminates the deep gullies below. Among the mists, the steep landscape of Mysteria is equal parts treacherous and tranquil. The sun streams through the clouds, illuminating the mists in shades of white and gold, broken by the patches of greenery that have made their claim amongst the rock face. Yet those who are not born within Mysteria would struggle to survive in such an inhospitable environment where one wrong step can send you plummeting down to the sharp rocks far below. The villages of Mysteria are built in some of the most inaccessible areas in Wraith, and those who live here must rely on their strength and agility to travel amongst the mountains. Racing along suspended ropes, scaling cliffs, and jumping across platforms are all second nature for the people of Mysteria, who have built their lives around the unique environment. A persistent layer of mist blankets villages across Mysteria, broken only by beams of sunlight streaming through the clouds. With the dawn, the village stirs as Mysterians rise to begin their daily tasks. Farmers begin to tend to the hanging gardens, caring for plots of rice and vegetables. Others journey down to the waters below, laying out their nets to catch fish for the morning markets. Inns open their doors to the morning air. Tea houses begin to make their food for the day, and students make their way to the dojo for training. The people of Mysteria value hard work and dedication, traits necessary not only to survive, but to thrive in the unforgiving landscape that they call home. Beneath the veil, Mysterians follow in the footsteps of their forefathers, working to preserve ancient traditions and teach each new generation in the way of their ancestors. Over thousands of years, Mysterians have developed a unique way of life intrinsic to their environment, encompassing creative endeavours, practical arts, and martial styles. From elaborate ceremonies and festivals to their education in the 7 arts, to the existence of groups such as the Grandmaster's Guild and Aoi Scales. Mysteria is deeply rooted in ancient customs and rituals dating back to the beginning of human civilization. When night falls, all Mysterians don an ornate ceremonial mask that hides their face from view and makes the living indistinguishable from the dead. Lanterns are lit and raised into the sky, floating among the stars, illuminating the dancers below. The celebrations last through the night and do not end until dawn, when the spirits return to the realm of the dead. Mistcloak Gully. The ancestral home of the House of Sangjing, Mistcloak Gully, is a sprawling collection of steep cliffs surrounded by a natural lake. The waterfalls within the gully produce a thick blanket of mist which obscures many of the buildings that lie deep within, far below. A fast-moving stream travels through the gully, the sound of rushing water echoing up the stone walls between the cliffs. Hidden between the mountains are a wealth of villages and towns following ancient traditions. The treacherous landscape and thick blanket of mist hide these villages from outsiders, concealing the buildings from view. Individual houses hang between the cliffs, suspended from massive networks of rope that can support the weight of entire villages. Larger communal buildings are carved into the mountainside. Taverns, inns, tea houses, dojos, spaces for markets and shops, as well as places to eat and spaces for sparring. The villages of Mysteria were founded by the great houses of Mysteria, who live in larger clusters of buildings constructed on the highest levels of the village. The steep mountains and jagged cliffs of Mysteria make traditional styles of building impossible, so the people of Mysteria have learned to construct their homes in tandem with the treacherous landscape. Buildings are suspended from vines and ropes, constructed atop bamboo poles, or carved into the mountainside itself. Mysterians commonly traverse the narrow gorges by running atop vines or ropes suspended between buildings. While villages, towns and cities elsewhere are constructed horizontally, many villages within Mysteria are constructed vertically, traversing the space between the highest peaks and the ravines below. Some buildings are even constructed on top of the water itself, only partially anchored at the sides, in order to rise and fall with the water levels. The 7 arts. The 7 arts encompass every occupation and role within Mysteria. Education for every Mysterian begins with a foundation in all 7 arts, slowly reducing the number of subjects as the child chooses their path. The 7 arts have been a part of Mysterian culture for generations, curated from centuries of traditions and customs. Through the 7 arts, ancient skills and practices have been preserved so that they can be passed on for generations to come. Major arts. There is a particular focus on the major arts, which include the fundamental lessons for a child of Mysteria. Language, agility, and basic combat are all incredibly important for anyone living within Mysteria, and so the major arts are an area of focus during education. Signs. The first art, the art of the signs, is comprised of the study of language and culture. Those who study this art help to record history, compose poetry and songs, and guide the many ceremonies across Mysteria. Hand. This art is the study of basic combat. While some students of the hand may go on to study the art of the sparrow or the art of the serpent, many choose to continue studying the art of the hand, which contains a wide variety of martial arts and combat techniques, The art of the hand is perhaps one of the most versatile, providing a foundation not only in combat, but in teaching young Mysterians the importance of strength and balance, both fundamental skills for living amongst the mountain ranges. It does not focus exclusively on hand-to-hand combat, but rather involves a series of techniques and fundamentals that cover the basics of most martial styles. The art of the hand reaches combat techniques which can be used for both offensive and defensive purposes. The hand includes both armed and unarmed combat styles, though training typically begins with the two fundamental unarmed martial styles, the Tao strikes and the Fito technique. The Tao strikes are a basic striking and parry system which focuses on quickly getting close to an opponent and locking in melee range physical combat while protecting the ninja's vital organs. Meanwhile, the Fito techniques utilize footwork, which emphasizes maintaining balance through a central line of power, allowing the student to anchor themselves and apply force from any position. Those students who choose to train for armed combat may study multiple weapons or specialize solely with one. Alongside the various types of swords, weapons may include metal fans, called gunsen, jong staves known as bow, long-handled weapons such as the naginata, a long bow, the yumi, or three-pronged weapons known as sai. Sparrow. The art of the sparrow is the art of agility and balance. While all Mysterians have basic training in the art of the sparrow, masters of this art are a sight to behold, weaving their way across the battlefield with ease. Those who train in the art of the sparrow practice more swift, graceful martial styles, using their speed and agility to their advantage. Rather than blocking or disarming their opponent, they slip past their opponent's defences, using their own momentum against them. A master of the art of the sparrow can deflect attacks, turning them back on their opponent as if diverting the flow of a stream. Minor arts. The minor arts, while included in the basic education of every young child in Mysteria, are not a main focus of their studies. Despite this, the minor arts still play a vital role within Mysteria. Serpent. The art of the serpent encompasses stealth and assassination techniques. Those who study the art of the serpent are all but invisible, raking down their opponents with deadly precision. The best students of the serpent can hide in plain sight, using their surroundings to their advantage, able to navigate their way through a crowd without ever being seen. The second minor art, the art of the earth, covers herbalism, farming, and tending to nature. Those who study this art help not only with growing food for those across Mysteria, but provide aid to villagers through herbalism and healing. Life within Mysteria would be almost impossible without their unique agriculture, carefully cultivated by students of the earth. Hanging gardens provide a space to grow rice, vegetables, herbs, and other essential plants, all necessary in order for a village to survive. Stone. The third art, the art of the stone, is comprised of masonry and building. Students of the stone work to construct and maintain buildings and are responsible for Mysteria's unique way of building around the landscape. The stone also encompasses all forms of forging, smithing, stonework and metalwork, from forming tableware, cutlery and cookware, to forging and engraving weapons. Finally, the art of the stone encompasses some forms of woodwork, such as creating larger pieces of furniture and maintaining the various ropes and bridges connecting the villages of Mysteria. Willow. The fourth art, the art of the willow, is the study of tailoring and weaving professions. Students of the willow are experts in creating the loose, billowing fabrics that Mysterians are known for, and also help to create many other aspects of dress, such as the elaborate masks worn for some ceremonies and festivals. Secret arts. Every major household in Mysteria has their own secret art, combat-related or otherwise. While some households have secret arts in the skills of weaving fabric, forging weapons, or constructing buildings, most households have a secret art for use in battle. From the eternal crane to the dance of the falling petals, each secret art is associated with a different house, and each art is only taught to members of the house. Teaching a secret art to an outsider is the worst form of betrayal a Mysterian can commit. However, the households of Mysteria are not the only ones to possess secret arts. Many Grandmasters are credited with creating their own secret art, something that they might occasionally teach to a student or apprentice. Occasionally, a Grandmaster may pass away without teaching their secret art to anyone, ensuring that their art dies alongside them. Prestigious households. Sanjing. The Sanjing house is the largest clan in Mist Cloak Gully, the home of their ancestors. The most famous member of the Sanjin house is Master Fang Min, who created the secret art of the Eternal Crane, a balanced combat style that combines evasive maneuvers and quick, sharp counterattacks. Miharu. This house creates some of the best armour in Mysteria, formed from leather and toughened cloth, flexible enough for hand-to-hand combat, yet tough enough to defend against attacks from a sharp weapon. The Miharu house provides armour for some of the largest houses in Mysteria. Yijun. A house that prides themselves on their weaving, members of the Yijun house create some of the most remarkable items of clothing imaginable. Many people of Mysteria purchase items for festivals and celebrations from the Yijun house. Fabric woven by members of the Yijun house can resemble anything from the shimmering ripples of a slow-moving scream to the gentle glitter of sunlight screaming through the mists. Ishigaki. The village surrounding Mist Cloak Gully exists in part due to the talent and skill found within the Ishigaki house. The work of stonemasons from this house is incomparable, as in carving buildings into the surrounding cliffs. They utilise the stone itself to prevent water damage and structural problems. Ikaru. The Ikaru clan, also known as the House of Blossoms, was one of the great houses of Mysteria that perished during the night of the Dark Tide. Founded by Mistress Ikaru 400 years prior, the Ikaru were adept at defensive martial styles and were home to some of the best carpenters and woodworkers in all of Mysteria. The legend of Mistress Ikaru. Long ago, a mysterious woman landed on the shores of Mysteria. She came from an unknown land, travelling from village to village. This mysterious young woman rarely spoke, occasionally giving voice to a question or engaging with someone in quiet discussion. One day, she came across a wizened old man sitting on a log, carefully setting out his wares on a worn blanket. On the ground before him lay 5 items: a chunk of rock, a dark crystal, a pale branch, a vibrant flower, and a tiny pouch. Looking over the items, the woman found herself drawn to the pouch. Old and faded, its drawstrings were tied in a simple knot, concealing the contents within. Curious, she asked if he knew what lay within, and if she might open it. Silently, the old man shook his head. After a moment's deliberation, the woman removed a ring from her finger a deceptively plain silver band. "Would this be a fair trade?" The old man merely smiled in response, offering a small nod. Thanking him, she passed him the ring, taking the pouch in exchange. The woman continued on her travels, moving from village to village. For months, she travelled across Mysteria, seemingly searching for something, yet never finding what it was that she was looking for. Finally, she came across a steep mountain range, carefully picking her way down the rocky slope. Standing atop a small hill, she looked down upon a rolling valley and pulled out the pouch that she had traded for so long ago. From the pouch, the woman removed a single pale seed. She planted it with her own 2 hands, watering and caring for the tiny seedling that sprouted. The seedling slowly grew into a beautiful cherry blossom tree, bright and cheerful in its stance, high above the village built below. Mistress Ikaru, once a mysterious stranger, took a name in honour of the tree that now watched over her home. The House of Blossoms flourished under her careful guidance, growing from a tiny village into a house worthy of its founder. Long after the mistress took her last breath, the Ikaru clan would continue to grow, thriving under the branches of the cherry blossom tree. The Keepers of the 7 Arts, a guild of instructors and academics with close affiliations to the Grandmaster's Guild. Due to their strong presence and noble cause of promoting learning and progress, the Keepers are much loved and revered by the Mysterians. Almost all Mysterian instructors are trained and stationed by the Keepers of the 7 Arts. Occasionally, a Keeper may take on an apprentice, a young student who lives with the Keeper and studies their way of life. With time, the apprentice will be trained to take over the Keeper's position as a teacher and preserve their unique techniques and skills. Grandmaster's Guild. The Grandmaster's Guild is not an organisation, but a collection of individuals with mastery over their respective arts. The exact requirements and selection process are shrouded in mystery, but the Grandmaster's legacy is well known across Mysteria as they work to promote the 7 Arts and improve villages across the region. Aoi Scales, an elusive organisation of spies and assassins known only by the symbol that they leave behind. Members of Aoi Scales are rarely seen lurking within the mists as they watch over the people of Mysteria, protecting their home from potential threats. She, the blind ferryman. Every year, those seeking enlightenment make the journey to Skylark Peak. On the banks of a grand river, the blind ferryman awaits these travellers. For some, he is a guide, transporting them upstream to the final stretch of the trail. Others awaken at the base of the mountain, left to return home, empty-handed. The Oracle, Valoise. A woman travels amongst the Milesian ranges in the space between Mysteria and the land beyond. Occasionally, one may seek her out, searching for answers and the chance to gaze into their future. Those who succeed return changed, wide-eyed, wishing that they had heeded her warning. For few who see their futures are pleased with what they find. Grandmaster Zhao. At the break of dawn, as sunlight begins to stream through the thick blanket of mist, Grandmaster Zhao appears in a village to begin his work. Villagers across Mysteria claim to have been visited by this man, tall and willowy behind his pale robes, healing the ill and repairing buildings. Every village he visits soon experiences a change of fortune as their crops flourish and people thrive. Legend speaks of the Grandmaster's secret art, mirroring the shifting waters, fluid and graceful. Katsu the Wanderer, the winds of change. Stalemate. Silence. The last of Katsu's words echoed through the room as he watched the Grandmasters turn their faces toward him, expressions cool and unaffected, as still as a lake in the midst of winter. "It is not yet time," Master Takumi spoke, his voice a counterpoint to the stillness of the room. "There are things that have to be taken into consideration. Autumn is already upon us, and you know well that the winds are more active at this time of year. That aside, the clan is not prepared for such a journey." "I'm not asking for the entire clan to leave. Let me take just a couple of Grandmasters with me, and we can begin the search." Katsu gestured to the doorway, to the distant sounds of people sparring outside. "I know others who would join me if it meant possibly finding a cure." Another Grandmaster raised his hand, waiting for silence before clearing his throat. "The clan has been dealing with this Seacan for generations. If there was a cure to be found, it would have been discovered years ago. As head of the clan, you have duties here that you must attend to. You have a responsibility to your people." "How can I be responsible for my people when they continue to wither and die from an illness that we do not understand? During my Jokyoku, I spent years travelling around to find a cure that lies beyond these mountains." "Absolutely not," Master Seori interjected, shaking her head. "We cannot risk revealing ourselves to the rest of Mysteria, least of all to the great households. It is not yet time, Katsu." "When will that be? We lose members of the clan to the Seikan every year, as we have for centuries. When will it be the right time to finally begin searching for a cure and find a way to save our people from this fate?" The room fell to silence once more, every gaze fixed firmly on Katsu. "We will know." Takumi's voice broke through the quiet as usual, his tone level and calm. "When the time comes, you will be the first to know, Katsu." Divergence. The village was tranquil in the early evening, as the clan had their evening meal and prepared to sleep. Only a handful of senshi were wandering between the buildings, some returning late from their training, others keeping a watchful eye over the Magenshi Gorge. Each of them bowed to Katsu as he passed, as he stopped to bow back before continuing on his path. As leader of the clan, no one questioned Katsu's presence at this late hour. The very air around him was still as he made his way to the ancestral shrine, kodachi sheathed at his side. A faint breeze stirred as he passed into the shrine proper, slowly lowering himself to kneel upon the cool stone. "It's been almost 2 years and I'm still no closer to convincing them." Katsu looked up to gaze at the sliver of night sky, visible at the edge of the shrine. Faint stars dotted against a sea of inky blue. They never have a reason, only excuses. They are afraid of leaving the gorge, afraid of change. They may never agree to my idea, or to look into a cure at all, not when the information lies beyond the clan grounds. Slowly, he pulled a long bundle from behind one of the statues, peeling open the layers of fabric to reveal his supplies. For several weeks, he had been slowly gathering supplies to bring to the ancestral shrine, preparing for this exact moment. Despite their age and detached composure, the Grandmasters were sharp as a tack. If any of them caught wind of Katsu's movements, they likely would have found a way to bring his plans to a halt. Quietly muttering an apology, he rewrapped the bundle and slung it over one shoulder, darting atop the shrine to balance on the edge of the rock face above. In a fluid motion, he pulled himself up through the gap and out into the fresh air above, climbing onto the edge of the cliff. Crossroads. The crescent moon was a thin sliver of silver in the night sky, its soft light muted by the dense storm clouds lurking on the horizon. In the cool night air, a figure slowly emerged from the mists, a straw hat casting his face into shadow. Howling winds coursed through the gorge behind him, echoing deep into the mountains and disturbing the peaceful quiet of the evening air. He turned to survey his surroundings, gaze sweeping over the landscape before him. Yet nothing else stirred, and he remained alone amidst the trees, a single figure cast in dark grey. His muffled footsteps carried him forward as he darted along one of the ropes swaying between the cliffs. A well-worn map lay tucked into his shirt, marking the paths from village to village. Over his years of wandering, he had long since found the trails leading to Mistcloak Gully, marked only by the passage of travellers such as himself. While several years had passed since his last journey to the town, the path remained unchanged, cloaked by a thick blanket of mist. 2 nights and 2 days passed in quick succession, sleeping in the warm sunlight and travelling by the pale light of the moon. A peaceful silence hovered over the mountain ranges, a layer of mist coating the plants in glistening dew. The calm evening air brought a lightness to Katsu's chest as he traversed the cliffs, wandering along the faint mountain trails. It had been many years since his return to the Magenshi Gorge to take over as the head of the clan, and in the time since, he had almost forgotten how it felt to travel in this way. While a part of him longed for those peaceful days, taking his time as he journeyed from village to village, he remembered his purpose for leaving and the duty he had to his clan. Yet, on the 3rd night, shortly after rising and continuing his trek, he paused, slowly drawing his kodachi. 11 figures emerged from the mists, faces obscured by half masks, eyes flashing in the dark. "Be on your way," Katsu warned, voice low and calm. "There is nothing for you here." "It has been some time since we met a member of the Magenshi." One man stepped forward, hands held palm up before him, showing that he was unarmed. While his mask remained, obscuring the lower half of his face, a scar rose from beneath the fabric, the mark of a burn marring his skin. "We were simply curious. Why would the head of the clan leave the gorge? We were under the impression that you already passed the Jokyoku." "Interesting that you should mention the Jokyoku by name, when not one of you belongs to the Mugenshi clan." A wry laugh met Katsu's words, muffled by the cloth covering the stranger's face. "There is much we know about your clan. We mean the Magenshi no harm. You and your people keep to yourselves and cause no trouble, so we shall not cause any trouble for you. We have not known a single leader to leave Magenshi Gorge after completing their Jokyoku. If there are storm clouds on the horizon, we would be grateful to know of their presence. These mountains have weathered many storms. Should a simple sun shower cause so much concern? Even in the largest pond, a single raindrop causes ripples. We would know that rain is coming, so that we might prepare for any ripples heading our way. There are no ripples to be found, nor any rain." Katsu shook his head slowly, fingers grasping the hilt of his kodachi. "I see." The man's hand settles onto the hilt of his own blade, eyes narrowing. "It is a simple request. I would not think honesty to be so complicated. If it's such a simple request, why are you so quick to draw your weapons? Katsu shook his head. I have no quarrel with you. I would prefer to continue on my way. There is no need for us to come to blows over this. I'm afraid that isn't entirely true. If you are so reluctant to share your plans with us, we shall have to convince you otherwise. The masked figures moved as one, darting through the shadows to strike at Katsu, their blades a flash of silver in the pale moonlight. Twisting out of the way, he called upon the wind, the air swirling around him as he moved to attack. The winds rushed outward in a torrent, streaming past his foes as he dodged past their blows. With a quick flick of his wrist, he slashed open one of the figures, turning on his heel to cut down another in the moment before they struck. The wind curling around him helped to deflect some of the assassins, pushing them back several feet, yet others continued to get closer. The flow of battle shifted as Katsu went on the defensive, gathering the wind around him as he began to prepare for another blast. Out of the corner of his eye, he noted a streak of crimson as more men raced into the clearing. They immediately joined the fight, closing in on his opponents with pinpoint accuracy. As most of his assailants were drawn away to defend themselves, Katsu struck out at the remainder with a blast of wind, sending them rumbling to the earth. His kodachi sung as he struck, quick as lightning, storming through the clearing to descend upon them. The group quickly banded together, gathering around their leader. He turned to glare at the crimson-clothed ninjas surrounding them, neither of the two sides moving to close the gap. You rebels need to learn to stay out of our affairs. You cause far more trouble than you're worth. With a quick, sharp whistle, the man motioned for the group to retreat, maintaining eye contact with Katsu all the while. Every member quickly disappeared into the dark night, some of them clutching at their injuries as they darted into the line of trees. Those who remained in the clearing all turned in unison to look at Katsu, identities obscured by pale masks covering the top half of their faces. One of the men removed his mask to nod at Katsu, his cheek marred by a small, curling scar. He gestured over his shoulder to where the other men had disappeared, raising an eyebrow. Interesting that the Scales should single you out. It appears we have a common enemy. The rest of the group slowly gathered just behind their apparent leader, crimson robes draped over their armour. What would make you think that I'm their enemy? They don't stop to talk to just anyone. For them to meet with you personally, you must have done something to catch their eye. Not quite. Katsu shook his head in response, eyes narrowed. If they do not often speak to those outside their organisation, I find it curious that you would be so familiar with them. We're a group known as the Crimson Haze. We've been at odds with Aoi Scales for a couple of centuries now. They didn't exactly take well to our founder's agenda. And judging by the pendant hanging from around your neck, I'm assuming that they have a problem with your clan as well. Is a simple jade pendant so rare? I've seen many others on my travels. It is the symbols carved into it that give you away. Usually only members of the great households wear seals such as yours. But the one you wear is different to any of the other clans. I can only assume that you're from one of the hidden households. You speak as if you belong to one as well. Its name would mean nothing to you. The man shook his head. Your struggle is ours, stranger. You should join us. We may be able to help one another. You have no way of knowing that. Katsu straightened, slowly sheathing his kodachi, though his hand remained on one handle. I'm not sure that our agenda is the same. This land no longer knows freedom. Our people are caged birds who have never flown. They do not know to miss it. They are hardly aware that they have wings at all. We would remind them. Not every creature with wings is destined to fly. Would you also see them rumble from their nests like a newborn chick, unable to use their wings to soften their fall?
I would give them the freedom to make that choice for themselves. In any case, we may be able to help each other. What is it that you seek, Wanderer?
What I look for remains a mystery to us both.
A burden shared is a burden lightened.
A pause stretched between them, silence reigning as Katsu sized up the man before him. Despite the mask, he did seem genuine and sincere about his offer of help. Besides which, if there were any chance that this man might know a possible lead on a cure, it was his duty to ask. My clan has suffered from an illness for generations. It is a curse, and we have yet to find its source, or why it continues to afflict us. I search for a way to help, perhaps even cure the illness altogether. After a long moment, the man nodded, looking thoughtful.
While we may not have a cure to give you, there might be a way for us to help. Across Mysteria, there are several hidden locations built by Aoi Scales to store and conceal anything that they want hidden from the public. Most hold scrolls, information collected by the Scales over the centuries, but some also hold artifacts. The Crimson Haze were planning to send a team to infiltrate one of these strongholds. The particular building that we are targeting also holds several powerful artifacts. There may well be one there with curative properties. If not, you may still have the opportunity to find some information on what might be ailing your clan.
You would let a stranger accompany you into the heart of your enemy's home?
We would give a fellow wanderer a chance to free his people from their burden. Our paths are not so dissimilar.
With no other leads on the disease and little to lose, Katsu finally nodded in agreement. If you are willing to have me accompany you, I would be grateful for the opportunity. Culmination. Through the blanket of mist, the entrance to the building was completely obscured, a hairline fracture in the cliff face. Yet as they drew closer, the fracture slowly opened up to reveal a stairway leading down into the mountain itself. As they stalked down the hallway, the others slowly peeled away, leaving Katsu winding through the shadows alone. While he lacked a map for the building, the rebels' instructions were detailed, leading him past the guarded entrances and rooms, and into the heart of the stronghold. Those few times that he crossed paths with one of the Scales, he slunk back into the shadows, a simple breeze wrapping around him to obscure his presence. Finally, he reached his destination, not a single person alerted to the intruder in their midst. The darkened hall slowly opened up to reveal a large chamber, shelves lining the walls. Not a single artifact was anywhere in sight, nor any item that could possibly help him. Instead, hundreds of scrolls were stacked upon the shelves, neatly organised, and covered in a very light layer of dust. Katsu stepped towards the centre of the room, where a single pedestal stood, constructed of white polished marble, with a jade tray containing 6 more scrolls. They were larger than many of the other scrolls in the room, free of dust and clearly well cared for. Just as Katsu began to consider how to carry the scrolls with him, he suddenly paused, slowly turning toward the person slipping through the entranceway. Immediately he noted the lack of weapons on the man's person, the light wrappings on his hands and feet, unobscured by the same fabric that hid his face and the rest of his body from view. Katsu drew his kodachi just in time, stepping forward to block the Grandmaster's attack. Quick and strong, the master darted around Katsu, striking out with sharp, swift strikes. His bindings bobbed back and forth as he struck out, using pure skill to work his way past Katsu's defences. Katsu quickly whipped up a gust of wind, using the blast of air to push the master backward. It earned him only a fraction of an instant, but it was enough for him to shift the flow of battle, putting him back on the offensive. The pair danced around one another, blocking and dodging, trying to break through their opponent's defences. Despite his speed and agility, the master was rooted to the earth, as if there was a chain physically connecting him to the ground. Even Katsu's strongest attacks could only make him budge an inch, earning a single second to try and land another blow. As he called the wind to him, he lashed out at the master, finally driving him back once more. Yet, in one fluid motion, the master quickly struck out at a small, barely noticeable metal disc attached to the nearby wall. The quiet chime that sounded in response slowly grew, reverberating until it had reached the intensity and pitch of a large brass gong. The sound echoed through the chamber, and Katsu heard more of these begin to ring in the distance, a warning to any member of Aoi Scales in the building. More men ran into the room, drawing their weapons as the master descended on Katsu once more. Within moments, he was defending himself on all sides. Calling the winds toward him, he felt the air whip into a gale, circling him with the force of a growing storm. The energy coursed through his Kodachi, answering his beck and call. Growing stronger with each passing second, the wind coursed through the room, circling the chamber. The roar of the wind blocked out all other sounds as it reached the pitch of a full tempest, dragging each and every man in the room into its wake. Katsu standing steadfast in the eye of the growing storm. The gust struck the master with a sharp crack, sending him flying into the stone wall. In an instant, the fight was over, as every member of the Scales was flung into the stone, knocking them unconscious. Yet, as Katsu began to sheath his Kodachi, more ninjas came down the hallway, heading straight towards him, swords drawn and ready to attack. With a quiet sigh, he began preparing for another fight, drawing the winds about him, but suddenly stopped to glance at the entranceway. Members of the Crimson Haze slowly began to make their way into the room, many more than the 6 that he had initially arrived with. The red fabric they wore did little to disguise the crimson stains marking their clothes, blood spatter coating their chests and arms. The ninjas belonging to Aoi Scales, taking note of the numbers before them, almost moved as if to retreat. Yet before they could, the Crimson Haze were upon them, cutting them down without hesitation. Many of the rebels present began slitting the throats of those lying on the ground, not bothering to wipe the blood from their blades. Slowly, their leader stepped forward once more, gesturing to the pile of scrolls sitting neatly in their jade tray upon the pedestal.
I see you found what you were looking for.
What happened to your small task force? Katsu intoned, his voice low.
It doesn't matter.
The man lifted his hand, curling his index finger.
We're here to take those scrolls. Anything else is yours.
Not until you tell me what information it is that you're looking for. That gave the man halt, Katsu watching as his hand dropped back to his side.
None of your concern. What was it you said to the Scales?
He paused for a moment before nodding to himself.
My plans are no business of yours.
They become my business when you trick me into doing your dirty work. Katsu nodded to the people lying around him, fingers tightening around his Kodachi. It's obvious you were using me as a distraction. Did you expect me to defeat the Grandmaster guarding the scroll? Or had you intended for me to act as a buffer while you took care of the rest of the Scales in the building? The rebel leader sighed heavily, pointing to the pedestal.
Just let us take them, Wanderer. There's no need for conflict after such a simple task. You don't even need to lift a finger.
No, I may not know what your plans are, but I wager they're not as altruistic as you choose to believe.
Very well, then. The man shrugged. It's clear that you are well on your way to ascending to Grandmaster. But facing these odds, even the most talented ninja cannot fight alone and expect to walk away. I would prefer that we ended this without conflict, but you've clearly made up your mind. You will tire sooner or later.
Yet before any of them could take a single step, Katsu held out a hand, halting the group. He turned his head slightly, looked over his shoulder at the air behind him. I have felt the wind stirring for some time now. If you are so determined to keep an eye on me, you might as well join us. After a moment's pause, a breeze rolled through the room, revealing 4 Grandmasters standing behind him. Each slowly drew their weapons, scrolls fluttering as a wind began to stir, rousing at the promise of a fight. As one, the crimson haze slowly began to retreat from the room, leaving the leader standing at the forefront.
We will remember this.
With that, he left as well, disappearing into the shadowed hall. Katsu turned to face the Grandmasters, bowing his head. I appreciate the support, though I'm not sure why you followed me. I thought none of you were ready to leave Magenshi Gorge just yet.
It was not the right time.
Before Katsu could respond, Takumi held out a hand, pausing.
When you decided to leave, it became the right time. You have shown our clan is a secret no longer.
So you were following me from the beginning?
You are Magenshi. We would not let you face this alone.
Takumi gestured to the scrolls. Katsu turned to inspect the contents of the jade tray, slowly unfurling the topmost scroll. A list of unfamiliar names stretched down the length of the parchment, each with some description of their last known location and current status. Some were held within Mysteria, while others were scattered across Wraith. While the names of some seemed to hint at their abilities or properties, none were properly described, only their titles carefully noted down. Katsu turned to recite some of the names to the Grandmasters, watching as their expressions visibly changed. Do you recognize any of these? Many of those were thought to be lost, though it seems as if Aoi Scales have been tracking them all along. Master Soori paused, looking thoughtfully at the scroll in Katsu's hands. The Crimson Haze mentioned that one of the artifacts might be able to lead us to a cure for the Sikan. It's possible that they were lying, but this is our best lead. Katsu gathered the scrolls, wrapping them carefully in his bundle. We must find them.
While many of these items are unknown to us, we can start by telling you of the ones we know. The blades of the seasons, the masks of misfortune,
You support this? Leading the way through the darkened hall, Katsu glanced toward the Grandmasters. I thought that you might try to stop me.
If you do not enter the tiger's cave, you will not catch its cub. We have sat idle for so long, and now that we have a lead, it is our duty to find a cure for the clan.
As they emerged into the pale light of dawn, Takumi turned toward Katsu with a nod. Adjusting his bundle, Katsu turned to lead the way back home, leaping from the cliff face and disappearing into the mists below.